You've been watching special coverage of the Artemis II crew splashing down in the Pacific Ocean, and we're now waiting to see the astronauts in person for the first time. Recovery teams are there to help transport them to the USS John P. Murtha, where they will undergo medical evaluations.
Integrity splashdown, sending post-landing command now.
Splashdown confirmed.
Copy splashdown, waiting on VLDR.
Splashdown confirmed at 7:07 p.m. Central Time, 5:07 p.m. Pacific Time. From the pages of Jules Verne to a modern-day mission to the moon, a new chapter of the exploration of our celestial neighbor is complete. Integrity's astronauts back on Earth.
I could keep watching that splashdown over and over again, Carter. CBS News correspondent Carter Evans live in San Diego. Carter, what can you tell us?
You know, I had goosebumps the whole time. I feel like I held my breath for 6 minutes during that blackout period. There were people down here along the waterfront, even though you couldn't see it with the naked eye. I think everybody wanted to come down here to feel like they were part of something bigger. This is happening about 40, 50 miles off the coast right now. And what's happening right now is we've got Navy divers, medical doctors who are divers. They're in small boats. They're waiting to get in the water right now to approach the capsule. The reason they haven't done it quite yet is because they're still trying to establish communication. Part of the process here is they have to power down the capsule before they enter it. And then they want to establish communication, and they're going to do that through basically a satellite cell phone to the astronauts in there. Once they establish that communication, make sure everything is working and the capsule is shut down, those divers are going to approach it, and they're going to attach something called the front porch. That's what the astronauts call it. It's actually a raft that attaches right below the port there. The door that will be opened by those medical personnel, those Navy divers. They will go inside the capsule first. They'll perform a quick evaluation on the astronauts, and then they'll come out of the capsule onto the front porch in a predetermined order. We're not privy to exactly what that order is, who's going to be the first person to step out. I think that's going to be a pretty big honor. And then they'll be airlifted back to the USS John P. Murtha, which is waiting not far from where you're looking at the capsule right now. They'll be ferried back to that ship one at a time, and they'll undergo some medical evaluations. They'll be given blood tests, saliva tests, cognitive tests, all sorts of motor skills tests. They want to make sure that these astronauts are in good health after this 10-day trip and living in this microgravity environment for the last 10 days. And then they're going to have a choice. They could decide if they wanted to. They could stay on the ship for the night if they feel like they need to rest, or they can come back here to San Diego to North Island Naval Station, and that's likely what is going to happen. They'll probably be flown back here by helicopter after they're checked out on the ship, and then they'll begin another barrage of medical evaluations, including some specific ones tomorrow, Saturday, where they're going to have to perform some maneuvers basically to see how their body and their motor skills are still performing. They're going to have to unfurl a rope ladder, climb up it, hand off a backpack to someone else, simulate things that they would be doing inside the capsule. They're going to simulate docking. So they want to see how these astronauts perform after these extreme stresses on their bodies. And of course, when they head back to the Johnson Space Center, they're going to be reunited with their families. Big party there, and a big sigh of relief here.
Yeah, I think when they're reunited with their family, that's when you say mission accomplished. But Carter, I have to tell you, as we were watching this from a newsroom perspective, we couldn't decide which piece to cut first in terms of editing. Every single thing was spectacular. And I have to tell you, I kept hearing the word precision. And you just can't thank the lucky stars enough that that's what it was. It was precision.
It was absolute precision. There was nothing about this was by chance. They have practiced this recovery team literally for years. They have practiced every single possible outcome. They've practiced this in rough waters. They've practiced it in calm waters. They've practiced this with the actual astronauts themselves. The last time they did a dry run, really a wet run because they were in the ocean, was January 27th of this year. They performed these exact maneuvers. So at this point, it is muscle memory for this recovery team. They know exactly what to do when any situation arises. But as you said, precision is something that is still occurring now, even after the splashdown in this recovery mission. But this has been a precise operation from the beginning and now to the end.
Yeah, and Carter, as we're talking to you, we keep showing and replaying the splashdown. That video is remarkable. Carter Evans, we'll talk to you in just a few, but I want to get to CBS News space consultant Bill Harwood at the Johnson Space Center in Houston. Boy, here we go. What did you think? What was your reaction? I want to hear it from you.
You know, I just kept thinking, what a ride that must be. You know, 13 minutes to go from 24,000 miles an hour to splashdown at about 15 miles an hour. I mean, it's just incredible. And when you think about the energy that they're taking out of that vehicle with the heat shield, you know, the temperatures up to 5,000 degrees and being able to manage all that. And then 11 parachutes have to deploy in just the right order, at just the right altitudes to get them safely down to the water. Just a remarkable thing to watch. I can't say I'm stunned. I mean, I knew what to expect, but man, seeing it in real time, that was something else. That was quite a ride.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we have a rundown to the precise second of when things are supposed to happen from a news perspective. And I have to tell you, it went as planned, even to the second as to when the splashdown happened. Obviously, no surprise to you, right?
No, because the thing you have to remember there is if it doesn't go per that timeline, then they've had a big problem, right? But no, these things are calculated down to the second. They know exactly how it's going to behave if everything's working correctly. And in this case, it clearly was. I mean, there were just some tiny minor hiccups along the way that had no bearing on the entry and landing. And they really aced it. Very impressive performance by these people, considering nobody's come back from the moon in a half century. And they nailed it.
You know, the impact is strong, but it's controlled. But what does it feel like? What did they experience at splashdown?
Well, you know, obviously they're experiencing some additional gravitational forces. So they're being pushed down in their seats with nearly 4 times the normal force of gravity as the vehicle is decelerating very sharply up in the upper atmosphere. And then, of course, hitting the water, I mean, that's a bit of a jarring impact. But, I mean, the seats are padded. I think that was no big deal. They were expecting it. So I think all that was fairly normal. You know, when you see those Soyuz capsules come back from the space station, the Russian capsules, they come down on land, and that really is a jarring impact. So I think all in all, this was easier on the crew than that, and I'm sure an incredibly welcome sight to them. You know, given all the concern before entry about the heat shield, you know, and all of that, the heat shield obviously worked.
Bill, I like how you put it. They aced it. Bill Harwood. Bill, thank you so much. Let's get to retired Lieutenant Colonel Dave Mahan. He is the former commander of the U.S. Air Force's 1st Air Force Detachment 3, which is responsible for planning and rescue and recovery of the astronauts. Wow. Lieutenant Colonel, now that they've done splashdown, what comes next? Walk us through the process.
So that was an absolutely amazing event. I know everybody's really excited with everything and the fact that the crew is down safely. So now this is where the work begins for the recovery. So as you've probably seen, the spacecraft is down, small boats are approaching. And really what they're going to be doing now is setting up the vehicle so that they can extract the astronauts safely, make sure that they're good. And then helos are going to fly in and hoist them up and then fly them to the ship to get them to the med bay.
I can only imagine. Yeah, so sorry. I can only imagine what they're thinking or going through when they're in there right now. Any idea?
I'm sure they're relieved and excited and happy to be home and ready to get with their families.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about the preparation and practice that's gone into this rescue and recovery of the crew and capsule. What goes into it?
So this has been a process, a joint effort between NASA, the Navy, the Air Force, U.S. Space Command. This has been going on since URT-1 was in 2017, but even before that, they've been practicing and figuring out how they can safely extract the crew, how to make sure that everything is recovered appropriately, and then make sure that the vehicle is recovered for all the science and things that go along with that. So this has been going on for well over a decade. And the list of the amount of teams that are involved in this, both on the NASA side, the contract side, and the military side, it's a very long list.
Yeah, to us, we think, oh, the splashdown was the grand finale, but really it's getting them out, and then it's the recovery and making sure they're healthy, and then to their families as well. Can you also talk about the hydration? I know I'd heard something about the fact that they need to be hydrated when they're back on Earth.
So that a little bit out of my area of expertise, but I do know that from the medical side, I've heard discussions with them talking about that is something, just because the difference between how the body reacts in zero G versus gravity and things like that.
Yeah. Let's talk about backup plans, obviously, for different situations. Bill Harwood had said that there were some hiccups. Obviously, we weren't able to notice that, but what are some of the backup plans?
Yeah, absolutely. So rescue is one of those things it's good to have, but you never want to actually use it. Right. And that's another side of this mission that has been behind the scenes from the beginning. So what the coverage didn't see was there was actually rescue forces that were postured in Hawaii with pararescuemen and C-17s and equipment and things like that that were on call and ready to go to be flown and then to rescue the crew if for some reason something happened. And they weren't needed, but they were always there just in case.
Can you talk to the reason as to why San Diego was the spot? And I know one of the factors is the weather, but it's beyond that too. It happens to be with the military personnel, correct?
So there is a lot of Navy support that's out of San Diego, and the Navy has a long history. It's been supporting NASA all the way back to Mercury and Gemini and things like that. And the type of recovery that was done today was something that could only be done by the U.S. Navy.
There's a point in time when there was no communication at some point, a blackout, if you will. I always find that unsettling, but what goes through your mind when that happens, when they don't have the communication and then they will circle around and certainly have the communication?
Absolutely. So that's one of those times where it goes back to trust and the expertise and the professionalism of all of the teams that have been involved in this. There is that trust, but I think everyone probably kind of holds their breath during that point. I know during the Artemis I mission, I was lucky enough to be out there, and even though it was unmanned, there was a lot of breath holding. And you know, when they got data back from that, it was exciting. And then just being, it was gave me chills when you hear the first communications with the crew when they got out of the blackout period today. So yeah, it is a little nerve-wracking, but you trust the professionals that designed everything.
And why is that blackout period, might I ask?
So the way it was explained to me from a physics perspective is the plasma builds up from the reentry, gets extremely hot, and then it just blocks out all communication. So as they're screaming in 5,000 degrees, slowing down, it just blocks out communication. For this mission was about 6 minutes.
I knew you'd have the answer. You'd answer it better than me. Lieutenant Colonel David Mahan, stick around. We'll talk with you in just a bit. Thanks so much.